Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Well, I played about 5 hours of Horizon Forbidden West on the PlayStation 5, and I don't feel like my normal review format is really the best use of my time and yours. I will make some brief comments along those lines, but then I want to spend most of my time really talking about Aloy as a character and some potential themes that I noticed, or maybe unintended themes. Anyway, just briefly though, visually the game is a nice upgrade on PlayStation 5 from the first PlayStation 4 game, and it borrows from the appeal of Ubisoft games as well, namely a fascinating and beautiful world that leverages graphics and sound design to make it appealing to explore and move around in. So it has a lot in common with Ubisoft open world games like Assassin's Creed. The combat is a touch more Monster Hunter-y in rewarding advanced planning. You know, things I don't remember from the first game that I guess maybe were there, like eating in advance, I think, is something I just noticed for the first time in this game, can help you out, maybe give you some buffs or something. And then there's also some effects that you can put on enemies like ice to make them brittle, and shock, which, you know, can make them more susceptible to different types of damage. And so these kind of like ongoing effects that will strip enemies of some of their defenses and whatnot, instead of like an instant gratification of, okay, they're weak to lightning damage, so do lightning damage. They're weak to fire damage, so do fire damage. It seems a little bit more like, well, get this weakness of theirs into play, and that will affect how combat plays out and how quickly it comes to a close. But really, on the easy and story difficulties, I seemed to be able to ignore those systems if I wanted to, at least during the first 5 hours. Other gameplay elements still leave it feeling very much like a Ubisoft open world game, Assassin's Creed in particular. I just started Assassin's Creed Valhalla a couple months ago, so I don't need actually another game this similar to it in my life right now, even though I still love the increased focus in this game on sci-fi elements, most notably with the cool machines that you fight and interact with. Bottom line, the changes from Zero Dawn to Forbidden West don't seem big to me. I suspect that if you like the first one, this is largely more of the same, but with some upgrades here and there, and you're likely to enjoy it as well. And I would just recommend that you see numerous other reviews for more details on that front, I'm sure. I think that I will buy this one between 1 to 3 years from now, when any DLC expansions will be collected in a complete edition, and then, you know, also be on deep discount by that point, maybe. Unless I finish Assassin's Creed Valhalla sooner or later. If I finish it sooner, then I may buy Forbidden West in a year or less. If I finish Valhalla later, then this game may end up competing with the next Assassin's Creed game for a spot in my library. It feels like a very solid and cool third-person open-world Ubisoft-y open action RPG, but apart from its setting and story, I don't think it's doing anything I can't find elsewhere in games I'm still in the middle of enjoying. So I think maybe it's coming up soon. For me to want to buy a game like this, it's going to have to really innovate in some particular area, and this one doesn't do that, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game at all. I think like I said, I'm planning on playing through this at some point. But for now, it also doesn't help that I think I might hate Aloy. In the first game, Aloy understandably had what I describe as an atheistic chip on her shoulder. She was a terribly mistreated outcast of a heavily theocratic society whose beliefs she discovered to be demonstrably false. Even though she came across as arrogant and abrasive many times in the first game, having her mistreatment so fresh in my mind as a part of that story made her character flaws understandable and many times tolerable to me. But I wonder if the traits that I called flaws were not seen as flaws by the writers. I don't recall her ever experiencing relational fallout from the rude way that she interacted with others in the first game. Instead, it felt like I was supposed to entirely agree with how, or relate to how she treated people, or relate to how she felt about others, given her mistreatment and the obvious falsehood of the beliefs of everyone around her. But she's not an outcast anymore in Forbidden West, except by her own will. And so she strikes me as someone with a chip on her shoulder that she needs to start getting over if I'm going to be able to really like her as a character. And that struggle, I think, to get over that chip on her shoulder would make a very interesting story. I don't know if that's the one they're going to tell or not, though. In Forbidden West so far, these abrasive character traits of hers remain a consistent part of Aloy and her interactions, but they don't seem to be acknowledged as flaws yet, as though the writers maybe think her abrasiveness should still be understandable given her circumstances. And so it strikes me a bit like some kind of, I guess I would describe it as aggressive hero fantasy that the player's meant to experience. Let me explain that a little bit. Many Christians and non-Christians alike have beliefs about reality that are not shared by a significant number of people that, as a result, we find it difficult and even frustrating to interact with. Aloy's interactions with others seem inspired by this very common human experience. But in Horizon Zero Dawn, and so far in my experience with Forbidden West, Aloy is conveniently right about what she believes, because the writers can simply write the story so that she is. Whereas you and I might not be correct in our thinking as we just disagree with others, even very strongly, on a given issue. Aloy also very often pursues her good ends, namely the good end of saving the freaking world, by socially or physically forcing her will on others. Usually this is done through a bossy attitude or taking control of social situations. And we as players may not object because we know that she is pursuing what is best for everyone's survival, right? As story consumers, we often even feel a sense of satisfaction when one character in the right sort of tells off a character clearly in the wrong, the same way we would love to do with various difficult people in our lives. Aloy lacks patience for those who disagree with her, people who are also often written to be ignorant and incapable of learning truth. And so we understandably feel a knee-jerk reaction to side with her during those interactions. But if playing this character is a gratifying role-play experience for us, a kind of a fantasy, a really satisfying fantasy when she tells off people that are obviously wrong and being jerks and whatever, if that is really gratifying to us as we play a character like this, I think we need to be very cautious not to let it fuel the way we think about or interact with people we disagree with, even those we passionately disagree with, people that we are absolutely positive are ridiculously wrong in what they believe. There is so much us versus them right now, especially in the world of social media, where we tend to express ourselves with even fewer filters and consideration of others. And Aloy's personality and choices and her place in the world only seem to reflect and encourage an us versus them attitude and trend, rather than model someone seeking a better way to interact with those they understandably and passionately disagree with. In short, I think Aloy represents some of the worst human traits that create so many bad interactions on social media. Traits we can all have from time to time, and that I hate to think are unknowingly being encouraged in these games. Oddly enough, if Aloy were written to be an obvious villain, or if I felt like the writing acknowledged these abrasive traits of hers as flaws, I would be okay with playing her much more than I am. I'm enjoying Assassin's Creed Valhalla right now. In that game, I am killing guards who are just doing their jobs, including killing and robbing characters that are ostensibly Christians, which you would think I should feel terrible about. But that behavior is so outrageous and alien to my real life. And I feel like the Assassin's Creed series is in part designed to acknowledge that the assassins are at least a mixed bag, morally speaking, rather than being purely virtuous, like I feel like Aloy is written to be and intended to be seen by the writers up to this point. So you're arguably playing a villain in Assassin's Creed, and you know it, and the game lets you have a lot of your own headcanon about who your character is, and therefore lets you have more agency over the story and the moral takeaways from it. But Aloy is Aloy, and the small number of branching personality choices and dialogue don't really change that. I'd rather play an outrageously obvious villain than someone who is being socially villainous but is treated in the writing as a virtuous person across the board. I don't need to play a virtuous character, but it rubs me the wrong way to sit through a ton of scenes where ugly parts of humanity are treated as good and things that we should aspire to in a sense. Now, it's important to say again, I've only played 5 hours of Horizon Forbidden West, so this could just be totally something going on in the very opening hours of this game, or something that will eventually eventually shift deeper into the game. Some reviewers have commented on seeing more of her flaws come to the surface over time in this story, which sounds good to me. I'm already seeing possible hints of that. I don't know if I'm reading too deep into some of the dialogue or not, but I just wonder how many of her flaws that I see will be recognized and acknowledged by the writing as flaws, and how often the writing will continue to seem oblivious to her flaws and seemingly treat them as virtues. Anyway, those are really my knee-jerk and first impression reactions to some of what I see going on in Aloy's character in Horizon Forbidden West. As I said, it's a game I think I'll play eventually and probably enjoy a good amount of, but right now I'm not feeling super pulled, both for gameplay and story reasons, to dive into the rest of Horizon Forbidden West right now. Those are all my thoughts for the time being. Would love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. And then, of course, I hope you'll check out the Christian Geek Central podcast and a bunch of other CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.